Our next reader is Tamas Panitz. You were born, pronounce the name. Go ahead.
Anne Gorrick.
Thank you. And lived as such for several weeks in Budapest, Hungary. He's a poet and student of written arts at Bard College. And your first book, provisionally titled Blue Sun, is forthcoming from Inpatient Press, which I keep thinking as Impatient Press, but it's Inpatient Press. Welcome, Tamas.
So I'll start with thanking you all for coming, and thanks Anne for having me. And start with stuff from Blue Sun, from the histories. There's some resemblance to the histories of Herodotus. I am not in a position to say if their language held any certainties. The places have all changed their names. Judging by this, they were not us, although they learned our language, which has never changed. They came in ox carts, wounding themselves in exchange for the Acropolis, in the way of short-livedness, and we were content to offer our prayer to tall, pretty girls. While on the plain of Tegea, buried at the head of two contrary winds, lay the bone keys for dancing without chains. Where the intellect fell upon the anvil, beneath the bellows, and the smith put aside his smoldering griefs to tell you something amazing about bottoming his well. Croesus neared those who ate figs and had nothing in ambush in the framework, who held Croesus' brother-in-law, brokered for peace during the eclipse in the limits of that year, as each party licked the other's blood, and the river was made to flow on both sides of that summit. They inundated Solon's Croesus in half the time it took to explain the snakes, the Lydians, having leapt off their horses and elbowed their way through what had been set off in their coming, scaled the wall no man had thought to pass a lion across, which is to say, the dumb half-soul of Croesus had begun to speak through a peephole in the kingdom of his melancholy. Croesus tossed his backgammon set into the sea and walked away as Cyrus, for Cyrus had led him there. After 2 pages of ancestors, carrying this residue of the city of the sun, Cyrus born through stillbirths, dreams, and elephants, his body is displaced by hermaphrodites and she-wolves. Cyrus also of Solon, who slaughtered his father's livestock in exchange for the whole of Asia, having wreathed Croesus with his myrtle, throws the backgammon set into the sea again, to have done it both drunk and sober. Yet this strengthening will not change the terms, as long as you were dancing then, one-armed, one-legged, around the 4 dialects like a mortar, as long as neither Croesus nor Cyrus impedes the man from Halicarnassus in nailing his tripod down at home, and his home out of the community, although the community remained 12-fold, and demanded of Cyrus their cisgender, under the guise of losing their own revolt, and sailed their leader past the harbor of Panoramus. So Cyrus built mountains to cover their release from the city, in whose harbor they sank a lump of iron with their curse. Cyrus led them in, stabbing in the air to the border of Calinda, defending every isthmus, lashing every island to the mainland at the price of the Xanthians, every man jack of them. Every god shut inside their temple that they be available for intercourse, if one were to pass Arderica 3 times on 3 separate days as they sailed down the Euphrates. There the bridge was built by which Cyrus measured the year and entered the city of infinite expanse, whose administration is irrigation and carryable in a skin boat, supposing your staff is carved with a rose or a lily or something, so you walk at the pace of that town. But the caves of Memphis long inundated. The queen, having thrown herself into a cheerless chamber, the old flame displaced rises in a column at the end of every main street by the gate. but these too had been pissed out or turned to obelisks of ghostly hospitality. In the center of town, around the sanctuary of Hermes, the trees touch the sky, so long as you are a blind king, exiled on an island of ash. Having thrown your eyes at the pyramids, so the island in Lake Buto becomes a floating island, and a canal is drawn through the Red Sea, as the aliens are banned from the aliens, and Amasis farts in the direction of Amasis, having learned no trade but warfare. Amasis, in whose city flits the shadow of the man from Halicarnassus, under the spectral law of Solon, whose canopic mouth mutters its oaths as the flame passes through the blue obelisks of Memphis, glint of Cambyses' eye as he stalks along some nameless quay. Quay. Cambyses demanded of Amasis a wife, or a mother, from Indo-European roots. Joined briefly by the man from Halicarnassus as they regained Memphis, Croesus seemed to flit through Amasis' dying eyes and into Cambyses, or perhaps was just a vision, a lightness as it sinks in the oily pond, as light jets in its otter form. Croesus painted chalk white in a crystal coffin set upright on the table of the sun, stares at the town, gathering dusk. Reciprocal Cambyses, his men on a mud march, eating grass, his sailors buried in sand for the mismanaged defense of his purest fear, the bodies of his house in ruination as the cow of symbols dissolves in the sanctuaries all placed before his blind will, to the final destruction of his immortal tendernesses. His miscreant sons carried off one by one, until finally, irretrievably, he is alone before his Monkus. The house of Cambyses come to rule no one, or just one. Whoever, his name is Darius, condemned to silence along with his horse. His children, the black milk of the dissolution of Cambyses. Variables halted on a singular variability, and the rock rose, culled from the beards of he-goats, will have nothing to do with him in perfuming Arabia. Nor may he rest in the river made up by some poet, or know if the end of the world is attractive or not. He will have nothing, which is his power, culled from his losses. He rages in loneliness across the plateau, facing obstinately the cliff face, and in the exponent of all suffering, a new sound raised forth from his inner ear. I'll move on to some string figures. The string figures, they're 5-line stanzas. I went to Robert one day and I told him that I had read in poetic meter and form that it was impossible to write 5-line stanzas in English, and he, the hand. So each line has some significance or other. Each finger pulled from Robert Graves, or I made them up. And string figures are what you make with string, and you arrange it. So, 1. This is the anvil, and this is the dance hall. The lion jumps through the flaming hoop, or a flaming silver lion sits motionless on the floor. The blacksmith begins his work, and people start to mosey in. Groups form, and comedy comes with company, while who understands laughter slips out the back like a broken cup. 2. Everyone's here, who knows why? Here's the dance, and in the dance hall a party lecture, and in the party lecture a flaming silver lion comments, every ring has a hole in it. The blacksmith's old dog brought the broken cup up the new road. He walked slowly up behind the earth to the east, nibbling shadows as he went. String figures 2. A little song running between the pool and not pool, between those verticalities, Bacchic against the great seriousness, I forget what, which means I've grown little breasts. Behind the thumb, the everywhere of the lifeguards' backs, color rays. From my haffiness, I issue hermaphroditic commands from this liminality, and everyone in the pool stops bathing. That was the first O'Hara reference. What? The echo begins to take shape. There's someone on the ridge there, in a sheepskin, pronouncing his name backwards, or swallowing it, or it's someone else's entirely. What? I yell, and he gobbles it down. And yells what over the ridges all day, and yells what to the search party sent out by his village, until at last, become very remote, he fashions himself in my likeness. Now, I'll read some more recent stuff, right up to what I wrote yesterday. Won't the raspberry juice run everywhere, with a child alone in the house, in this tedious peasant town, and the peasants, they still think it's an intermezzo, despite the blood rights. So they will be disappointed, not know about the calendrical patching up of things, the way Strauss was in the stork, or how the waitress blushed when she saw how much lamb was on my plate. Abstruse, dirty thoughts, brief enlightenment. The object only matters insofar as it does, so long as the story gets to telling. Everything's the same that way. It's also dear to syntax. He has all 20 day signs on his body and costume. The way real fat men are always falling in love. Taste everything, that's how we see, by tongue. You're all the exercise I could ask for. Licking things, I mean. That's the sport you let me continue, Mr. Wind chimes. I name you a double name. You say things so I can hear in them, hear my own name traced back to the wind. There's nothing to be scholarly about, ad pondus omnium being directional to the weight of all things. We level with each other's. The instances of you make sudden me, and senses between us the faint glow of rotting wood, shape of the animal you carry, faintness of you. Come water your sheep in me, in my perfect parts, the parts you didn't read. Thought not to be thought. What's buried alive? What wasn't there to be read? What doubtful in hopes secreted away made the rotten us, sheep-shaped shadow on the field we wear, like some crevasse where the eyes don't go, still and weightless in the field. I quiver under the morning, that broken latch of your thighs, act out the shadows of my back in that place, and through body giving way to the blood, intermezzo to intermezzo, a play like light runs down yon hill. The animals you dreamt of, she said, had bivalve hearts. And the worm, I asked, since it is infinitely divisible? One pump, said the witch, and she asked to buy me dinner. Or better yet, make bone marrow soup as I recite my poetry to her, or tell her my thoughts. And I was cold. I had to kiss her to get back in. Ha. These are all funny, just so you know. So I owe Sylvia a poem, and so I've rewritten this poem to her like 3 times, and now she's basically not in it at all, but it's fine. There are 2 footnotes. Fwib, for, with, in, by, it's an acronym for the Latin genitive case. Giordano Bruno suggests pairing the genitals with the genitive, using the body to recall declensions. The Devachan, it'll be self-explanatory, but it's the godland in anthroposophy, the 2 realms of the astral body, the lower Devachan's that of feeling, the higher intellect. Don't worry about that. The message for Sylvia. There are certain inalienable distances, durations without space, signed things, Akkadian cuneiform constructed from golden rectangles, things I can't prove in the earliest Mesopotamian language, fragments of their religion, what the genital god Fwibbed today, 4000 BC. His conjunction is the same now, same architectural form of the Devachan, that house of us, from which feelingly and in different keys, spinning in our own directions, we recall our memories, the images we've placed there, adjects, what lives in the house we share against time. We call those to mind, and in the difference of each room, where your lamp is my crotch, from qualis to qualitas, In the misdemeanors of friendship, we find the signal fires are lit. Intelligible in the pidgin of our feeling, we do nothing but mean. And here's something I wrote with the constraint that I would use only monosyllabic words, meaning that my hold was to use words of one soul count. And it's called In the House of the Plains. Here I am, she said, dust mites, here are the tell-all, on a plain, in such a fog, none but the sun would have it. I am in a room on a plain. I know, she said, for the bits that hang in the air of a clean room, small hooks for time, the pots and pans of the plain, they say it all. I am of that age, a day of mists and mites. The room smells of, not mine, said she, not now at least, or an old cloth, what weighs in the thick, not my cloth. I touch my face and feel my hands age, here I am. I see on the desk by the view a sole white sheet with 2 signs inked on the bas de page. That is my age. I will be done here when I am done, when the signs cease to hold me and give way, and I am solely heft, in the thick of them. Here in it all, you'll know where to find me. I am close in it, or not. She is a church of, bring yours to see. When in one like a thief in town, she breaks in them all. Thief of you. Break into me, she said. I am a child in the well of wells. I have burnt this place and am brought back in the cloak of the wind. I cease to lift the signs, but they do not cease to lift me. They tell me your name and I come, a hand that won't close. I bring all to be made of, a croak in the wind. The plains are still here. They don't care what town you're from. Where 2 towns meet, that is the plains. Where next to the trash heap, sat on the fence by a few small shrubs and trees. She says, hey pal, like the sound of whiz, she is quite muse, I call, and you see her in an old black hat, and she looks good. She does not need her front tooth for her legs. She looks like most Midwest girls would, sans one tooth, which I like all the more. Hey pal, she says, you think the plains are just some thrift store for your mind to list through? You think plains are just for your mind? Where all the way in New York you don't think. My lad, I mean gal, I can't stop think to have you in my mind. I want but to doff my love to you is all. This is the hub for Lucas. You are the middle place of the 4 cardinal directions. Whichever way they supposedly point, one of them is you. You are the back, to make sense of the 3. You could not cast a shadow, nor could your shadow cast one, were it otherwise. Were you anywhere but the back, which is the middle, between 2 ups, where you face the back of things, where one weighs the front, where what it takes courage to face lives. It is important to face that. Zeno did, and we still think it a paradox. Zeno put the back in front. Turn your back to face the music, he said, to go up, as in, I'm going up from Aser to Marduk, and then from Marduk to Aser. You must believe in your back, because there is no way but up. Every place is its own god. Every place is comprised of 3 images, and man is the 4th, completes the seal. And the seal floats belly up, the 3 images in the swash made sense of by the back. And this seal is every place, and the god of that place calls its back the ground, where man lives. The ground is so much ecstasy under which the gods cast the shadows of their backs, and man realizes the ground in him, where he is, like I said, between the 3 images of which he is 4th, and the up of them, and the god of his place, just as soon as he gets up. That was another sort of O'Hara reference, I thought. And this is the last thing. This is what I wrote, the last thing I finished. The Drifter. I have an old friend whose icy sidewalks morning better watch out for, who talks about today late at night in bold words, perhaps in front of the laundromat. Ground through the mill and through the grindstones, he smokes Carlton Lights, tasting all its old associative power, like bland gum of prophecies. His is the promise of a matinee at any theater where no movie is showing. He is shaped like an old friend, and you can't quite see him, because far away and his back to the light. Thank you.